Fine. You ready?
I think we're ready.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Troutdale Planning Commission for Wednesday, October 13th, 2021. If we could have roll call, please.
Commissioner Wittrin,
Present.
Commissioner Wadilla,
Here.
Commissioner Mamone,
Here.
Commissioner Prickett,
Here.
Commissioner Wilcox,
Here.
Commissioner Allen,
Here.
Chairman Stephenson.
Here. Okay. And with that, I would like to ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will lead allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, is there anyone who would like to speak to the Planning Commission this evening on a non-agenda item? Anybody out there in Zoom world? Okay. With that, did everyone receive a copy of the meeting minutes for September 8th, 2021? And I guess we will start with Commissioner Wilcox, please.
Okay, don't have too many for this one, but starting on page 1, let's see, 7 lines down under public comment, a line that starts transcribed and made a part of the record. ORS 192745 provides and states, quote, to ensure. The word should be ENSURE rather than INSURE.
Okay.
Moving along, page 3. The second paragraph that starts with Ms. Prickett. Ms. Prickett moved to approve the minutes as amended, and Mr. Wilcox seconded. That should be Commissioner Wittrin seconded. I want to mention also, I confirmed that on the audio, and I was going to say, since we're getting a new transcriptionist, that when people making a motion and second, they should identify themselves or be identified by the chairperson. And in that particular recording, Chair Stephenson did identify both individuals. So that was a listening error on the transcriptionist's part. Okay, that's all for that page. Page 4. 3 lines up from the bottom on the paragraph that starts Mr. Wilcox. The line starts again. However, to Mr. Wilcox's point, the applicant could turn in a brand new application as well. This does save some time. It's unclear what the word "this" is referring to. I think it should read, well, to make it more clear, it should read reconsideration would make reconsideration would save time.
Okay.
You get that one, Chris? Alex?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
Okay. Okay, page 5, under number 5, discussion items. On the topic of electric fences, I'm seeing the word electrical used instead of electric fence in several areas. I don't know whether you want to do a word search for that and fix them all in one shot, or I can point them out as we go. How do you want to do that? It appears Here's about 4 or 5 times, I think.
Okay. Just go ahead and correct those as a whole.
Okay, that sounds good. That same paragraph, 5 lines up from the bottom. Commercial or industrial uses when the wire is employed. Wrong line. Line starting minimum of 6 feet above the finished ground surface and does not exceed or does not extend over a public way. I think it should read public right of way. Okay, page 6, about the 4th or 5th paragraph down that starts with Chair Stephenson. Let's just go ahead and read as far as I need to get to the problem area. Chair Stephenson said they could take barbed wire and razor wire and combine them in the definition. He asked if they would then look at light industrial and general industrial, but not the industrial park. And I'm thinking that's a reference to the industrial park that's at the corner of Marine Drive.
No,
No,
that would be the one that's at the corner of Troutdale Road and Cochrane.
Correct.
oh, okay. I don't know that one. Anyway, we might want to specify which industrial park you're talking about there.
That's true because there are more than one.
That's fine.
Okay,
Okay.
identify that.
Yeah.
Page 7, all I've got is 3 more references to electrical fence.
God damn it.
I think just one more on page 11. Second paragraph from the bottom starts with Mr. Wittrin. 3rd line down reads outlet malls should be singular rather than plural. I think that's it. Yep. That's all I have.
Okay, do we have any other corrections to the minutes from September 8th? Commissioner Whitford?
Chair, I move we accept the minutes for September 8th, 2021 as amended.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Whitford, second by Commissioner Prickett to accept the minutes of September 8th, 2021 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. Okay. Ready for this one?
Let's do it.
Okay. The matter for tonight's meeting is case file LU-0020-2021 Fox Ridge Apartments. Before we begin the hearing for tonight's agenda item, I'd like to explain a little bit about the Planning Commission and the procedure we'll be following for the public hearing. The Planning Commission is an appointed 7-member volunteer body of Troutdale citizens. Members of the Planning Commission are Troutdale residents who've been appointed by the City Council. They serve 4-year terms. They are strictly volunteers and receive no pay for their services. Planning Commission serves as a citizen committee for the review of land use applications and various land use related matters within the city. Items which the Planning Commission consider include uses of land, subdivisions, major variances, land use policy plans, and development regulations. For some land use applications, the Planning Commission makes a final decision. For other applications, they are simply making a recommendation to the City Council, who renders the final decision. Tonight's application is a quasi judicial public hearing. And these are held in accordance with Oregon law and procedures contained in the Troutdale Development Code. The hearing will proceed as follows. City staff presents their report, which includes applicable criteria and standards for the matter under consideration in the land use application. All testimony and evidence should be directed towards these criteria. If you believe that other criteria in the comprehensive plan development code or other city land use regulations apply, you must identify these criteria and explain why they apply to the decision. The Planning Commission accepts public testimony relating to the application. The applicant is allowed to speak first, followed by proponents, then by opponents, and then by any parties neutral to the application. An opportunity will be provided to anyone testifying to clarify any issues raised. All issues raised by a participant during the public hearing must be sufficiently clear and specific to allow the Planning Commission and other parties an opportunity to respond to those issues. Failure to raise an issue during this public hearing may invalidate a future appeal based on that issue. Prior to closing the public hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony regarding the application. The Planning Commission must grant the request either by continuing the public hearing to a future date or by leaving the record open for at least 7 days to admit only that specific additional written evidence or testimony. If the record is left open for the additional written evidence or testimony, any participant may file a written request for an opportunity to respond to new evidence submitted during the period the record was left open. If such a request is filed, the Planning Commission shall reopen the record to allow any person to raise new issues which relate to the new evidence, testimony, or criteria for decision-making. I'd like to remind you that these hearings are recorded. Good microphone for the table.
Oh, yep.
Okay. When you come up, please state your name and address clearly for the record. And if someone's testified and you agree with what they've said, you can basically say, you know, I agree with this person, and then just add on anything that you want to. Okay, and before we open the public hearing, does anyone other than driving by the site or anything have any ex parte communication, conflict of interest, or anything to declare?
Nope.
Okay. With that, I would like to declare this evening, the applicant has Mike Robinson of Schwabe, Williamson, Wyatt as their legal counsel. And Mike Robinson has done some work for me personally in another part of the state. So, good. Okay, with that, I would like to go ahead and open the public hearing for case file LU 00202021 Fox Ridge Apartments.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chair. I'm going to just for the benefit, just remove my mask without any objection while I present, just so there's no muffling. This is a familiar property, a familiar type of development to the Planning Commission. Because it is a de novo application, we still owe it for procedure purposes as well as for good governance to go through the application again. I know a lot of you will recall elements of this presentation. There are elements that are very much the same, but there are some key differences which we will highlight. So please, again, forgive my length of the presentation, but I do want to make sure we give it proper due diligence and consideration. So we'll cover the following items here tonight. and spend particular time on the approval criteria of especially those that may have been altered since the previous land use application. So again, a refresher and a reminder of the property we're talking about. This is generally a grouping of properties located at or around 910 Southwest Halsey Street. Status is partially developed. There were 3 homes on site. Land use designation was high density residential. Zoning is apartment residential A2. So again, I stress that unlike some other recent multifamily applications, this is not a rezoning of property. This is not a map amendment that we have before you. This property is already zoned apartment residential A2. It is within the town center overlay. There is a minor degree of slope district as well that is on the site. And surrounding property uses are residential in character. Single family to the north, although it is also designated as high density land use. To the east, multifamily residential, an existing older apartment complex that is served by Halsey Loop. To the south is also a multifamily residential property, Troutdale Terrace, which is actually accessed off 257th. And to the west, you have a medium density townhome attached and single family, excuse me, not townhome, a single family smaller lot subdivision. There are townhomes further to the west, but not immediately adjacent. The property has frontage on Halsey Street, but importantly, it also has frontage on Halsey Loop to the east, which is what we'll discuss a little bit later. I'm sorry? Oh, I think Mr. Thomas, your mic might be on.
Could you mute yourself, please, Mr. Thomas?
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Also, many of you have driven by the site. It is off Halsey Street. The site, as many of you know from the previous case and knowing the site as well, anecdotally, you know, it is a very sloping site with a very long driveway up to the previous residence. Significant terrain differential, which has caused problems in the past for previous development consideration on the site, particularly with water pressure concerns, but also access as well. Prior to last year, there was a so-called spite strip that inhibited development from accessing Halsey Loop, which is a public street. That spite strip was eventually removed with the previous property owner as well as the property owner of the apartments to the east, meaning this subject property now can take access off Halsey Loop, and that is what the proposal will show. So what is being proposed? It is a 162 unit apartment complex. This is market rate with 9 buildings, amenities, and common areas. Again, primary access would be taken from the east off Halsey Loop. For half-street improvements would be required, including a significant right-of-way dedication. There would be bike ped and emergency access onto Southwest 5th and 6th. There would be tree removal in select areas. There will also be trees along the western property line that would remain for visual screening purposes, as well as just site maintenance. Again, what is not being considered tonight is any sort of rezoning of the property. One additional thing, since we're dealing with multiple properties, this would also involve a lot consolidation of the properties as well. The general architecture that is being proposed will look like this. You have seen this before, but we're talking about a 3.5 story garden style apartment complex. Again, the components of the application include a site development review, which given the typical thresholds of this type of development would be a type 2 level review, meaning a staff decision. However, given the history of the site and the heightened interest of multifamily residential in this community, staff and the applicant elected to move this to a type 3 application for your consideration. It also includes a lot line adjustment, as just mentioned, consolidating 5 separate tax lots into one, and 3 select variances on the screen. There are some critical differences, however, between this case file, which is case file 20 of this year, and the previous one, which was case file 10. First is the unit count. The previous application, which was introduced in August, was at 166 units. There's a small drop in the unit count down to 162. That is due to the conversion of some daylight basement apartments into garage parking. As a result, the parking count is actually being increased by 6, meaning there is now more on-site parking being accommodated by this application than was before. Why that's important is also the degree of the variance that is being sought, meaning the parking standards, is decreased. And while those numbers don't seem that insignificant or don't seem to be that substantial, the degree of the variance actually jumps quite a bit down to a typical range where usually you could have it as an administrative adjustment type level of variance. So that crossing below 10% threshold is important, but it also factors into the overall density calculation where there's a reduced density now, as well as a reduction in the range of density that is required. You may recall in the previous discussion that we have a density target that units or development has to be developed from an 80 to 100% range of development because of the reduction of units that lowers the overall number from in that range. So it is still within a density requirement level, but it is a lower impacted property based on the unit count. The other thing too is there's decision criteria that change. The variance to the required off-street parking will change. So we'll cover that. Why that's important is that would have trickled effects then to the site development review elements, meaning that anything that was conditionally met by the variance would also therefore then be met by the site development criteria. The applicable standards that you would be looking at with this application remain exactly the same. You are looking at 3 approval criteria sections for 5 different components of the review. The procedure here is a type 3 review. Again, you are the decision-making entity tonight. Is quasi-judicial. As before, we notified the exact same boundary along the periphery of the property. This is the required public hearing. And as before, there's a 120-day clock to reach a decision. In this case, that clock expires in mid-January. Only the applicant, again, can pause the so-called clock, if you will. Again, appeals must be made and paid for within 10 days of the decision, and only those who have provided testimony retain appeal rights. And that can be through oral testimony in writing, and they can only appeal a matter or an issue that was under consideration that they presented. And an appeal in this case would go to City Council. An appeal date tentative the earliest potential appeal date would be November 9th if any appeal action were to take place. And as mentioned before, technically this application could have been reviewed by a type 2 procedure where staff makes the decision, but we did elevate it to a type 3 matter. This is just an updated review timeline. Again, the pre-application really was the same as it was with the previous application. Just the characteristics and contents and the details of this application are different. So the applicant submitted their information in mid-September, a month ago, and we are here at the public hearing. Notifications were sent out to the same group of folks, largely copied and pasted the same types of conditions of approval, and agencies believe that this is still an approvable proposal. And we did receive a testimony from the public. As before, we did want to bring up what we believe to be the closest comparator for your analysis, and that is the recent apartments that were on Cherry Park Road and 242nd, similar style and market rate type apartment impact, albeit a larger project. We want to focus on the parking considerations as well as the demand considerations. Again, details, this is a very recent project. Unlike this particular case, this one did require rezoning change or a zoning change. As of August, 98.7% of the units were occupied, although all of them were leased. There were 216 units of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom setups, as is the case here, and 512 parking spaces were provided, which was actually slightly above your typical or your standard parking situation. And what staff had found, as you recall, was a slew of unused reserve parking, and this was taken on a weeknight at 9 o'clock in the evening. So you have seen these images before, but again, for the good of the order and for the purpose of the staff presentation, we are recycling this. One thing we did notice in particular was the compact spaces on the site, which we suspect were largely created in part to make sure that you could have a development that met the parking criteria. Those compact spaces went largely unused when nearby standard parking was available. So again, of the 512 spaces that we saw, about 190 of them, meaning the parking lot was at about 63% full capacity. If you do the math on 322 spaces used by the 216 units, that comes out to about 1.5 spaces per unit. So the apartment complex, again, is at effectively full capacity. And as mentioned, compact spaces were largely not being used. So it inferred several findings here. We believe as a staff that the 2.3 parking spaces per unit is excessive. Now, that is not the matter on the table. I want to be very clear. We're not having a judgment on should we change our standard tonight, but this is kind of what we have observed and how it may impact your decision tonight. Unused parking also means an unnecessary expense to the developer. And yes, that has trickle down effects and it does contribute to housing affordability issues. Compact parking spaces are being excessively put into plans in order to reach a parking requirement and threshold, and the conversion upon compact spaces into standard should be evaluated when it reduces the total number of spaces offered. When we look at the housing needs analysis, and this is an official city adopted plan required by the state, we find that this particular application, and in this case also with Eagle Ridge, met these income thresholds that we have highlighted here. Again, Eagle Ridge, which was the most recent example, which we believe the best comparator, offered the same bedroom setup. It was 100% leased out. There was a waiting list for 1 and 3 bedroom units, with those rates kind of being the market rates at the meantime. So again, on observations, we think actually the housing needs analysis may have underestimated the market demand for multifamily housing. Market rate multifamily housing in suburban settings remains popular. 3-bedroom unit rent prices are adequately supporting houses at 100% of the area median income. And single family home prices, frankly, are out of reach for many people at that income level. Comparator, pretty much right across the street, the new townhomes that are being built are starting at about $420,000 for a townhome. And if you do the math, if you use the typical 3 times your yearly salary as something that you can afford, it puts it out of reach for a lot of people. Some additional considerations in our general analysis of the Fox Ridge proposal. Again, this is a site that is already zoned to allow for multifamily residential development. The access concerns, the access is being taken off a street of lower classification, meaning it's coming off a side street of Halsey Street, not off Halsey Street directly, but off Halsey Loop, which would not require then a new curb cut on Halsey Street, but it would require improvements to Halsey Street for traffic channelization. And that was something that the county addressed in their conditions of approval. There is already a bus stop in close proximity too. And the addition of additional residents along this corridor will help sustain and hopefully improve the efficiency of that bus line, which in recent years has seen an uptick in service because of demand. So that we believe that this helps in that in this overall trend. On the landscaping perspective, the western tree line adjacent to 5th and 6th Way is largely to remain intact. Common spaces in other areas would have new and substantial tree plantings, and we do believe there's been potential opportunity for additional landscaping if parking did require further reduction, but we believe that this is a pretty good setup already. The tree removal, the trees along Halsey Loop themselves, which is a row of trees there on the western side of it, are actually in relatively poor to fair health. They were not going to be very sustainable, and that would be the area where the right-of-way dedication would need to occur to allow for the proper street width and sidewalk features to be installed. And an arborist study provided by the developer and the applicant confirmed that there were no rare, threatened, or endangered trees or animal habitats on the site. One last thing, again, to reemphasize, tonight, we're not going to be, what's not really for debate is what our parking threshold should be. It's just the staff observation that we think 2.33 is high. And that's one of the reasons that we factored into the draft approval criteria that we had for you, is we have observed it to be a problem, but we're not changing the code tonight for that standard or asking you to change the code tonight, but we are asking you to take real life instances in that. And before I turn it back over to you all for questions, I'll pull up the same spreadsheet that we showed you several months ago that showed the other apartment complexes in the area with some analysis there. The other thing too that is also currently not really for debate tonight is what level involvement that staff or this body or city council or another committee could have in impacting or affecting the actual design of the site, which I know was of interest to this body. That is definitely a high level topic of consideration that should be debated and discussed. But the merits of this application is we have a very narrow and objective list of decision criteria that we have to abide by. So we may not personally think that this layout may be optimal or this architecture may be preferable, but that's not really what we as a staff can use in our recommendation to you, or that frankly you folks in your decision have. Housing requires very clear and objective standards, and we believe the applicants will have met them through the approval criteria, which we will cover here shortly. Again, when we're talking about approval criteria and looking at an application, all of the approval criteria have to be satisfied or met, or can be conditionally met through adopted findings by you folks. And again, in this cases, we have 5 set criteria to go through. I'll take a break after each one in case there are any questions or clarifications on them. The sequencing of it, we will cover the variances first, then we'll cover the site development review, and then the lot line adjustment. So again, these are the variances now to the building height considerations. Again, what is being requested here is a slight uptick. We have a 35-foot height allowance. 38 to 39 feet was what was requested. And again, as a reminder, in the August application, the previous land use application, there was no disagreement with the premise of the findings that are presented here. These are effectively copy pasted findings from what you had in the previous case file. So special circumstances or conditions apply to the property and are not typical of general conditions in the surrounding area. In this case, we've highlighted the hilly terrain of this property. The applicant was seeking to find opportunity for accommodating the slope through daylight basements, also garage parking. We believe that this was done in good faith and good effort to do it, and we believe it's a unique situation. So we believe the criteria here was met. Variance authorized will not be injurious to adjacent properties of the surrounding neighborhood, otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. Public comments that we received did not express concerns specifically on the height of the buildings. According to the narrative, 35-foot height requirement on the uphill side of the building, potential views of nearby properties are no more impacted than if the site was flat. In the property to the south, it sits even higher up, and the buildings closest to it are actually not the ones that are seeking the variances to the height. The row of the trees to the west would be significantly maintained and would provide visual buffer. We believe that also the applicant's using low pitched roofs as shown in the architectural plans to reduce the height of the structures as best possible. So we believe the criterion were met. Variance authorized will be consistent with the general purpose and intent provision from which a variance is sought. Intent of the provision is to allow 3-story buildings to be built in the zoning district, and they're going to use the design to accommodate the steep slopes to meet density requirements and to avoid unsightly large retaining walls. We believe the criterion is met. And the variance is the minimum necessary to relieve a practical difficulty from full compliance and to avoid or minimize the resulting hardship. Again, they are using low-pitched roofs. They are looking at situations where you can have daylight basements as well as tuck-in parking where possible. We believe the criterion were met. Any questions on the building height variances? The second set of variances were for the setbacks to the parking area on the south side of the property. If you recall, in the first application, there was some question as far as the degree of the variance there needing to be sought, whether there should be compact spaces or standard spaces. In this case, the spaces were for standard, and we believe the criterion were met. The site, again, we spoke to the specific sloping characteristics of the site as to believing that that was appropriate and that the criterion was met for the unique situation that we find it in. Again, no public comments were received specifically addressing this variance request. Property to the south is higher in elevation than the subject property. Applicant had proposed retaining a wall. Landscaping would occur, and the parking for the existing apartment development in the south is located along the entirety of the shared property lines, so there would only be parking on parking, basically. The criterion would be met in this case. Variance authorized would be consistent with the general purpose and intent. And again, when we're talking about setbacks, largely the code is talking about vertical or building setbacks, less so about ground setbacks. It happens to be in our code that parking setbacks are applied here equally. But if adequate and sufficient landscaping can occur, if there are walls and buffers that can prevent any sort of negative impact onto other properties, then we're probably going to be okay to allow for a setback to a variance to occur. That's the case here. If the subject property and the property to the south would have been all one development, no buffer would have even been required between two rows of parking. So we believe here the criterion was met. And the variance is the minimum necessary to relieve a practical difficulty with full compliance. Again, we're talking about a situation where they're trying to come close to meet the amount of parking as possible. There was feedback, of course, from the previous case about the importance of standard parking if possible. The variance, again, is to extend 3 feet 2 inches into the rear 15-foot setback. This allows for 47 standard size spaces, a 23-foot wide drive aisle, which is, again, is sufficient still for fire response and emergency services. And again, the previous application did show the row of compact spaces, but we believe that the criterion here is met to satisfy that and to address concerns of too much compact parking on the site. Any questions about the variance to the rear setback variance request? Okay. As to the actual parking standard variance, the request of how many off-street parking spaces. Several of the criteria will remain the same as had been previously prepared. There will be, of course, some changes here, so we'll highlight them. Special circumstances or conditions exist on the property. As noted in previous findings, the site features significant slopes that are not typical or do not affect the surrounding properties as significantly due to land use. Topography creates economic and spatial challenges to developing a feasible site, a feasible project, which we have witnessed time and again with multiple attempts at previous development not panning out. And we believe that this is the best case effort to utilize the terrain and parking as best as possible. We believe the criterion here was met. The variance authorized will not be injurious to adjacent properties in the surrounding neighborhood, otherwise detrimental to public welfare. The applicant was required to submit a traffic impact study. It was reviewed also by Multnomah County Transportation and by the city's Public Works Department. Both agencies have proposed conditions of approval for right-of-way improvements, dedications, and easements. The applicant is proposing 340 spaces. That is a slight uptick from the 334 previously shown. With 162 units on site, the required number of spaces would actually be 378. Applicant has proposed 14 adjacent, which brings out actually down the required number of off-street to 364. The variance is 6.59%. The amount of parking works out to a ratio of 2.1 spaces per unit, not including, and that excludes the 14 on-street parking spaces. So again, the variance to be technical, again, you're actually technically offering, or the applicant is offering the 14 on-street parking spaces, but the actual variance is based on what is required off-street. So that's why that number is the way it is. The application states that the owner and the developer found a ratio of 1.8 spaces per unit to be adequate. City staff's own analysis and research has shown also that 0.91 to 1.7, although more closer to the 1.5 to 1.7 range, is what we have observed to be the actual utilization rate. This suggests that the 2.1 spaces per unit is more than sufficient to adequately accommodate parking on the site. We believe as a result, the criterion is met. Variance authorized would be consistent with the general purpose and intent provision which the variance is sought. Much like the previous finding, we looked at the National Household Travel Survey. 38% of rental houses in the US actually only own one car. Same survey found that 42% of the households live in census tracts with a population density within Troutdale's range. Using the lower number of 38% of the households had only one car, and all the other households had two cars, would have 269 occupied parking spaces. That would leave 71 parking spaces in this scenario remaining for guest usage, approximately one space for every 2.2 apartment units. The, excuse me, trying to move my icon here. The code is for one space for every 3 apartment units, but there would be adequate guest parking available. Calculations are based on national stats. It's reasonable to assume similar trends could apply to Troutdale, as these statistics include communities of suburban character and not just urban centers. We believe this is compelling evidence. We believe the criterion is met. And the variance is the minimum necessary to relieve a practical difficulty with full compliance and to avoid minimized resulting hardship. The applicant appears to have made every effort to include as much parking as possible, and actually has done so by adding 6 additional spaces into this proposal relative even to the last one. So if anything, this criterion is even further underscored and met. But at some point, obviously, there's a tipping point. And while the unit count did drop, there is still an expectation of return on investment. And while that can't be figured into the criteria, it is at least demonstrable that they were able to provide a plan and a capacity that they believe they can still work with and address the concerns that this commission had with the previous land use application. Are there any questions about the variances just for the parking standards just covered? Again, those numbers are up to date. The degree of the variance again went from 10.7 down to 6.59%. Okay. Almost there, folks. Thank you for your diligence here. Site development review criteria. These are largely the same. The proposal complies with the approval criteria. In this case, the finding here shows that the criterion would be conditionally met, and that would be incumbent upon the variances for the rear setback and the height variances being approved. Proposal complies again with the approval criteria here on nonconformities. Existing structures proposed to be demolished. They have since been demolished at the time of the application, or since the time of the application. There are no required upgrades to the existing development. The criterion is met. Proposal complies with the approval criteria specified applicable to site design and development standards of the code, such as landscaping and parking. This is one, again, where we believe that it will be conditionally met provided that you agree to the variance on the off-street parking standards. Again, the red just indicates the updated figures from the previous land use application. It is at 340 now. The variance is now at 6.59%. The landscaping standard was met, and we believe provided the variance for parking is approved, then this will be conditionally met as well. That's the remaining portion of it, but effectively that's what we're trying to say here. And the proposal meets existing conditions of approval for the site as used by any prior land use decisions. There are no prior land use decisions on site that affect the approvability of this application, even though you had a more recent land use application. We believe the criterion is met here. Any questions on the site development? Oh, I'm sorry, one more on the site development review. If applicable, design standards are proposed to be adjusted. In this case, there are no proposals or adjustments for the design standards, so the criterion were met. Any questions on the site development review decision criteria? All right. And the applicant must, this is for the lot line adjustment, the applicant must demonstrate that the proposed lots conform to the applicable zone. No boundary line would violate the applicable setbacks, and the reconfigured lots or lot would comply with access and site distance standards. We believe the proposed lot would meet all dimensional standards. No boundary lines would violate the setbacks. The applicant needs to resubmit a record of survey to show those items just to confirm that. So in this case, it's a conditionally met obligation and a condition of approval for us as a city. So all that to be said, staff has a recommendation of approval with conditions. The conditions are from planning, building, public works, Multnomah County Transportation Planning. Those are binding conditions, by the way. And then Gresham Fire and Emergency Services. In the interest of time, I would not go through all of those conditions. Needless to say, there's still plenty of homework for the applicant to perform. If you decide to move forward with an approval tonight, they certainly are not out of the woods and have a lot of work still ahead of them to do. It is uncommon that we have an application for a property be as reconsidered as quickly. We understand it's unusual for this body to see this, for the city to go through it. But I also stress there is no cooling off period or required year to go by as there would be if it was a rezoning application. Staff stresses that, again, this is a property already zoned for this type of development. It is a difficult property. There have been multiple efforts to develop it. And we believe the facts of the matter speak for themselves and that the applicant in good faith has tried to address the concerns that this body had with the previous land use application. I do have the table showing the other multifamily properties and their parking ratios. If needed reference, I believe Commissioner Wilcox had asked for an additional development to be shown. I think we're just confirming those numbers, so we would be happy to show them at the conclusion of public testimony as you're in deliberation. Are there any final questions before we pass it on to the applicant?
I just have one. How long has this property been zoned A2?
It has been at least since the 1998 town center plan, from what we can tell. Beyond that, we didn't see a full record on it, but certainly the town center plan called it out.
No other questions for Stan? Thank you. Need a drink of water or anything?
Maybe something stronger, but that's not in polite company.
All right. With that, at this time, we would invite the applicant to come forward, please.
My name is Mike Nugent, and I am the development manager for the applicant. I'm joined here tonight by several members of our team to answer any questions that you may have. I am a resident of Portland, Oregon. On our team tonight are all of the partners of the applicant's manager, our architect Doug Sarcosta, civil engineer Jeff Vanderdassen, and legal counsel Michael Robinson. We'd like to thank you again for your volunteer service. This doesn't happen without your willingness to do that, so thank you very much for your service. We remain excited about this project and about doing business in Troutdale. And we're eager to move ahead with your blessing, hopefully tonight. We understand the committee's concerns regarding our previous application. Those concerns specifically having to do with density and parking. And we have made changes to this application, which we believe are responsive to those concerns. Rather than reiterate all the details that the planning staff very capably laid out and detailed in our earlier presentation, we welcome any questions or clarifications that the commissioners have. And there is one clarification I'd like to make with regard to the requested parking variance. Staff's description is accurate, that compared to our initial application, there is a net change of 6 parking spaces added. That is, while technically correct, I'm sure the commissioners probably remember that during the process of the initial application and the follow-up hearing, we modified and deleted some compact parking and replaced it with standard parking, which resulted in a net reduction of 7 spaces. In this new application, we have deleted 4 apartment units, and we have added 13 parking spaces. So while it's true that compared to our initial application, the difference is +6, we're actually adding 13 spaces compared to that application as it evolved because of the elimination of the compact spaces along the south border. Also, by eliminating 4 units, we effectively eliminate the need for between 9 and 10 spaces. So the net change is we feel is more significant than you might initially conclude from the net change of 6. We are comfortable with the conditions that are requested in the staff report, and we're prepared to move ahead, as I indicated, with your blessing. We've enjoyed getting to know Leanne Steffen with the Troutdale Historical Society and accommodating several requests for tours and photo documentation of the houses on the property. And we look forward to being part of the community. I am available and the rest of our team is available for any clarifications you might request or any questions that you may have.
Questions for the applicant?
And when you were previously here before us, we talked about that south parking area, and we keep on going back to all compact or all full size, but I also made the suggestion of, could we split it up 50-50? And I know some of my colleagues are trying to get every space available and get closer to the metric that we're looking for. Did you guys entertain that thought at all of trying to split it up a little bit between compact and full size to gain a couple more spots?
We haven't specifically done that, but we would be welcome to anything the commission felt was appropriate in between. That's not a hot button for us. We believe that we have more than adequate parking, and if we wanted to mix in some compacts with those, we're certainly receptive to a condition to that effect.
That's all.
Okay, questions for the applicant? Going.
This is Commissioner Wilcox.
Commissioner Wilcox, go ahead, sir.
Yes, I have a site design question for the applicant. Between buildings C and H, there's a green space that's described as barbecue / viewpoint / dog area. And my question is the dog area fenced entirely? Because it looked like there was a gate at one end.
It is our intention to have it completely enclosed with at least one gate. There might be 2 gates, but I'm not sure of that.
Okay, so that'll be kind of like Troutdale's first dog park, as far as I know, unleashed dog park. So that sounds very good. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone wishing to testify as a proponent to the application? Okay, anyone wishing to testify as an opponent to the application? Anyone online?
I think Mr. Handy muted.
Yeah, I think he unmuted. Mr. Handy, did you want to testify this evening?
Yes,
Okay, go ahead, sir.
so I am assuming that you've received the 11-page letter. And I've also assumed that you've all read it, all 87 pages, plus the links. No? Yes? Okay.
I believe most of us have.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go to the back page to save you time. This has been more of a parking lot exercise, I think, than anything else, so I'm glad to see that you reached some conclusion on that. I still have issues with 4 things. I will refer you first to page 3. And it deals with park and open space. The director brought up that this land has been designated as A2 property since about 1998. And there should have been some consideration, some communication from the director to the Parks Advisory Commission. There should have been some communication from the Planning Commission to the Parks Advisory to see if there was some possibility of donating or acquiring some property on this 6.4 acres that would have accommodated some park space for the citizens that live there that are not represented because they are not landowners. And I've noted that on page 1 and through page 1 through 2 or 3. So I've not heard any deliberations, any comments, any discussion about the possibility of doing that. So I'm assuming that the Planning Commission has decided not to do anything. I'll go to page 5. Page 5 deals with condition number 11, when it requires an environmental habitat assessment of the property. Now, maybe the arborist was correct. Maybe there are no endangered species on the property, but the arborist wasn't asked to do that. The arborist was asked to do an assessment of the habitat. But the arborist is not qualified or certified to do a biologic or an environmental habitat assessment of the property. So how do you propose to meet the requirement that is written under condition number 11? I've been on planes. I've been on 2-seaters, 4-seaters, 8-seaters. I've been on passenger planes. Doesn't make me a pilot. So it's disingenuous for you to continue to promote the notion that the arborist is qualified to do the assessment. So again, I'm asking that a proper assessment be done. And that's noted on page 5. On page 6, the director stated, quote, "We will want to continue working with the applicant to identify additional tree protection where possible. There may even be opportunities for additional landscaping that isn't even shown." Okay, so how are you going to do that? What language are you going to include in this development that will address that? The planning commission should make these opportunities a part of the project by defining the scope necessary to achieve those 2 opportunities. The director also stated that there were not any sort of trees of significance. So the director is now qualified to judge the significance of the trees. Under TMC 1310-130, the director should have completed a long time ago a list of significant trees. Are you aware of any list of significant trees? The 3 large Doug fir trees on the property have been there for, well, at least 1962, since they survived the Columbus Day storm. If you look at the Gresham significant tree criteria, it gives you a much broader, more complete, more detailed view of how significant trees should be inventoried and listed. It should be done, because once you cut them down, they're gone. There was an issue about the cottonwood trees. So Tanny, I've included a link to the black cottonwood. Black cottonwood is a pioneer tree. It is significant when it comes to bird habitat. It's just an anecdote. Thought you might be interested in it. The other thing that needs to be brought up is throughout the documents that the city of Troutdale has produced, including the 2040 plan, the comprehensive land use plan, and other documents. Throughout those documents, they talk about wildlife in Troutdale and how important it is. So we have identified over the last 40 years some bird species and animal species that most likely either are permanent or migratory that we've identified on our property, and we don't have 6.4 acres, but we have 0.72 acres and within 500 feet of the property. We've identified the following migratory birds. Migratory birds including Bullock's oriole, cedar waxwing, pileated woodpecker, Townsend warbler, western tanager, golden crowned kinglet, red-breasted nuthatch, lesser goldfinch, varied thrush, and evening grosbeak. So I would really appreciate the fact that if a true wildlife scientist, biologist, take a look at the property to make sure before you destroy some more habitat. I've included references to the National Geographic, USDA, which is United States Department of Agriculture, Oregon Fish and Wildlife, and several others that Amber was nice enough to attach as links in addition to the 87 pages that I sent you. And I will be forwarding my other comments to the council along with some other recommendations. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify as an opponent to the application? Any neutral parties wishing to testify? Okay, with that, do they want to rebut? Come on forward.
I move that we close the public hearing.
Commissioner Prickett, if you don't mind, the applicant would like to rebut first.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nugent.
Again, I'm Mike Nugent from Portland, Oregon, representing the applicant. With regard to comments made by the opponent testimony, I'd like to just add a couple of things that occur to me. I don't quite know how to address the comments regarding park and open space because we're developers. We try to find properly zoned land and build a sensible project. We do have quite a bit of attractive open space and amenities within our project. In the opponent's testimony, he was worried about kids running around in the street and playing. And I'm confident that we're providing resources for kids that will encourage them to stay on site and have a lot of fun. So we're comfortable with that. With regard to tree protection, we love trees. We love retaining as many trees as we can. Not only does it help to create a mature landscape, but it saves us money when we don't have to get rid of trees and plant new ones. The vast majority of the trees on this site are on the perimeter of the property. The ones on the east perimeter are have been identified by the city's code compliance officer as primarily dead, dying, or broken from storms and need to be removed with the right-of-way expansion for Halsey Loop. We are retaining all of the trees on the western boundary, except for a few that have to come out for the emergency access from the two streets on that side. So that constitutes the vast majority of the trees on the property. We're adding 105 very nice specimen trees on our landscape plan, and I think it's going to be a beautiful development, particularly as it grows and matures. That's all I have to say, but I would like our counsel, Michael Robinson, to add something at this point.
Any questions for the applicant before they go?
And the only question I have is, could you expand a little bit about the arborist that you employed?
Sure. The arborist is, I believe the designation is ISA qualified. I'd have to look to make sure that's correct. We had him do an extensive review of the site to confirm our impressions of the site. And he did so, and we're comfortable with that report. That it for me?
Yeah, I have one question. I mentioned before about screening. Would you be opposed to fencing the property or screening security purposes?
We have looked at that, and no, we're not at all. We don't object to that at all. In fact, because of the grade change from the property to the south, we anticipate that we'll have a fence along that perimeter for safety purposes. And with regard to the residential to the west of us, there are already fences along all of those properties along that boundary, I believe. So, but if there are gaps that people are concerned about, fencing is not a problem for us. We're happy to do whatever makes sense.
Any other questions for the applicant?
This is Commissioner Wilcox.
Okay.
I have one additional question. It's kind of off topic from where we are now, but it wasn't clear where the extra 12 garages are coming from.
So in building B, which is one of the buildings that had 3.5 levels, effectively a daylight basement level on the north side of the building, we have eliminated the 4 apartment units on the ground floor, the daylight basement units on the north side of that building. And those, in place of those 4 apartment units, we will be constructing 12 garages and 1 open parking space that fits in the middle of 2 sets of 6 garages each.
Okay, so building B will have 12 garages on the upslope and the downslope both?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
That changed because it's obviously the closest in proximity to building A, which does not have any garages. So effectively, we think that it'll be a nice feature for those garages to be in relatively close proximity to building A. We also incidentally think that the garages are going to be in significantly higher demand given the trend of manufacturers and society toward electric cars, because we intend to put electric charging stations in most, if not all, of the garages. So we think there'll be a higher than usual demand going forward for those spaces.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Robinson will speak now.
Can I take off my mask while I testify?
Yes, you may.
Hi, good evening, Chair Stephenson, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Michael Robinson. My last name is spelled Robinson. I'm a land use attorney with the law firm of Schwabe, Williamson and Wyatt. My mailing address is 1211 Southwest Fifth Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland, Oregon, 97204. So I don't want to over-lawyer this. I think I've had the benefit of watching a couple of hearings on this application. I read the application packet. I read staff report and understand how the director reached the conclusions and recommendations that he's made to this body. But I think I want to do a couple of things. And by the way, let me do this first. Before you close the hearing, if there are questions you haven't asked of me or Mike or another member of our team, please ask us. We're here not just to make our case, but to answer your question. So, like I said, I don't want to over lawyer this. You've probably heard enough about this application in the last 6 months. But I do want to make a couple of comments, if I could please, about Mr. Handy's testimony. So a couple of fundamental things about land use, and I'm telling you things you already know as planning commissioners. Facts in his testimony or anyone's testimony need to relate to the approval criteria. If someone isn't relating facts to approval criteria, they may be making good points and maybe they're appropriate for legislative action, but they're not appropriate in a quasi-judicial matter. Now, I think folks ought to be able to testify in a hearing and say almost anything they want. That's what goal one is all about. But at the end of the hearing, the planning commission has to sort out between what's relevant and what's not relevant. And so I start with that observation about how this process works. And again, I apologize, I'm not talking down to you. I know as seasoned planning commission members, you know that, but I wanted to say that as a matter of record. So while I think all of us appreciate what Mr. Handy did, the fundamental problem with his testimony is it's unrelated to approval criteria. So the comprehensive plan, for example, Mr. Handy cites a provision out of your code that refers to applicable comprehensive plan policies. Well, this is a site design review application. As I'm sure the planning director would tell you, it's unusual to have comp plan policies called out as being applicable to site development review applications. And in fact, yours doesn't call out any site development review applications. So there aren't any applicable comp plan policies. So facts relating to what the plan might have to say about trees or natural elements, while they're important, and maybe they're important to the city council in terms of that body thinking about changes to the code, they're just not relevant to the approval criteria. And so, for example, in Mr. Handy's testimony, where he talks about particular comp plan elements in goal 5 in the plan, that's simply not a relevant approval criteria. And again, without over lawyering it, because I don't want to do that, I don't think you need it. There's also a number of state law policies that would say that you can't apply comp plan policies to this type of application. But you don't need to go there because your city council hasn't put in the approval criteria any comp plan policies. There are no applicable comp plan policies. Secondly, I recognize the importance of trees. I think if Oregonians appreciate anything, it's trees. But the section Mr. Handy cites, 1310.130, is part of a general work task description to the planning director. Now, maybe it's not been done, maybe it should have been done, but it's not a quasi-judicial approval criteria. And I note that it wasn't listed in the notice of public hearing. Mr. Handy's certainly entitled to raise it, but it's not a quasi-judicial approval criteria. It's a list of things that the planning director should do. It's really a sort of a, as I said a moment ago, it's a work task to bring information to the council, but it doesn't turn into a quasi-judicial approval criteria. Lastly, the park. I did take a look at your comp plan. Many comp plans, for example, will have a star or a check on property that the council thinks should be appropriate for a park. This property doesn't have that. And since it's been vacant, since it's been designated A2 since at least, did you say, Chris, 1998?
That's our understanding.
So it's not been used to its fullest and greatest potential under the zoning designation. I'm sure the city is aware of it. There's nothing that would have kept the park director or some other officer of the city, or indeed the city council, from reaching out to the property owner and saying, we'd like to have this as a park. But to try and make it a park through a quasi-judicial proceeding is not what this process is for. So I think all of us appreciate anytime citizens, I know I do, and I've been doing this a long time, but I appreciate it when citizens, supporters, or opponents take the time to participate in land use hearings. But as I said at the outset, that testimony ultimately has to be related to an approval criteria. And in this case, the approval criteria suggested by Mr. Handy simply aren't relevant to this application. So thanks for listening to me. I probably went on a little longer than I should have, and I apologize for that. But I wanted to make the point that notwithstanding this good scholarship, it doesn't have anything to do with the decision before you tonight. So as Mike said, we hope that you'll approve the application. And Mike didn't say this singularly, but I'll summarize this. The commission asked about a couple of conditions of approval. Mike said the applicant would accept them. And so if there's a motion to approve this, we would accept those conditions of approval. We thank you for your time tonight, and that's all I have unless you have questions for me.
Any questions for Mr. Robinson? Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, sir.
yes, I don't know if it is the right time, but I would like to see if I can ask a couple of questions and elucidation to the applicants about the design of the road.
Okay,
Will be this okay?
Questions?
no, okay, I'll bring him back up. Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Mamoni.
Yes, this is for the applicant. Good evening, sir. First of all, thank you very much. I appreciate the effort that I saw you and your team put together for the development, for the design of this multifamily complex, and the rendering seems to be strengthening that excitement about what this development might be. I voiced from the beginning no concern about the logistics of the development, the size of the development. I think it will fit seamlessly very, very well. But there are a couple of questions that I have for you, sir, and I would like to ask you if there is a way to have a conversation again. These are not demand of any possible way, but a conversation and maybe reach a compromise about some elements that are relevant for me. While I understand also from the comments of the director that we are really meet the technical aspect of the code. We are in full compliance with the bureaucratic aspect. There are elements of pure physical design that concern me a little bit. And maybe these are not, as I tend to believe, not outstanding. First one is I see in your design just north, very very south on the development, just north of building H, what is listed as a barbecue, viewpoint, and dog area. Is this barbecue viewpoint? What is it? It is a share open space. Is an addition to the play area. What is it exactly in nature?
It is designed as an amenity to benefit all of the residents of the project. And what we have done in similar situations, if you're familiar with the site, you know that there's kind of a shelf on the south end of the property that has some very nice territorial views to the north. So we anticipate developing a patio barbecue area that will have views to the north between buildings that will be very desirable as an amenity to the apartment residents. And so there will be a patio and some barbecues. We haven't laid out all the specifics of it yet, but it will be intended for common use. And then there will be an open area to the east. And then finally, along Halsey Loop will be the fenced dog run area, which we found is very popular among residents.
Okay, so this is really what in other municipalities, in other agencies called this traditional shared open space where the people who live in the development that can have a barbecue, congregate, sit down. It's not necessarily a children play area. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And did I understand correctly when you were suggesting that topographically there is a plateau here? This area is a little more elevated than the surrounding land. It is correct?
Yes, it is on the higher portion of the site.
Okay. So I appreciate that you do that because sometimes people don't have consideration for those open spaces for people that want that have kids, that want to congregate, senior people that want to feel safe. My question for you was if there was a way to relocate is not exactly the right word that I'm looking for, but if there was a way to place the shared open space, maybe more in proximity of a play area, and maybe instead of being the way I see it right now, it is really, and again, my apologies to you, sir, I don't understand exactly the topography here, but it's completely surrounded by parking spaces. And so good theory over the years has suggested that what we want when we develop a square, when we develop a plaza, when we sit down outside in outdoor open spaces, that we want to be seen and we want to be seen. There's also a level of safety for people senior people, for children. So surrounded by 2 rows of car, of even more carport when there is a roof, this doesn't seem to aid in what it is traditionally considered good urban physical design about public spaces that are for the masses to be seen and to be feel safe. So I was wondering, is there a way that maybe we can move things around in your design? Because I can see where we have the pool area and the lawn area and the play area. It is wonderful, even though it's facing the backs of the residential area, but still you have the eye, what we call in urban design and planning, the eyes of the community on these public spaces. And we know by study that when people are observed, they shape their social behavior in a positive way. We eliminate bad social behavior. And so similarly, I was wondering, is there a way we can create an area, share open space, where people congregate, where there are meetings, where there are senior, adult, family parties, where there is a little more sight for the people to feel safe and for the people to observe other situations. That's the first question. The second question is that this is a very large development, of course, 162 units. Correct me if I'm wrong. All I can see here is 2 locations for solid waste and recycling collection areas. And none of them, maybe the one to the north, just north of building D by the carport, but the one on the south doesn't seem to be very strategically located. If I was living on building H on the far end, on the east end, and I need to go to dump a bag of trash, I need to walk around 51 parking spaces to go and drop something. So is there a way we can find a place? Obviously, there is a need for circulation for the waste management truck to place a little bit more of this unit, this solid waste and recycling collection area, and maybe in a little more strategic location, because right now it seems somewhat unfunctional, to say the least. Maybe if it's not necessary for the one to the north, just north of building D, but for sure, if you are in building A, you still have to work quite a lot. And of course, if you are in building H, again, you have to work 50 lots. So I was wondering if there was maybe by readjusting some parking, by shifting some parking, maybe shifting some circulation, have a little more, a higher number of this solid waste recycling collection area. But fundamentally, I would like to see if it could be an effort on your side to really create this share open space as a successful public space. Again, not just in the theory, but when we build over the years, when we, as I said before, when we build a plaza, a square, an open space, a restaurant with outside eating, people want to feel safe. And that's why we don't have a restaurant outdoor sittings surrounded by parking spaces. That's why plazas are not surrounded by lanes and lanes and rows and rows of parking spaces. So I would like to see if it could be an effort about maybe combining some of these elements, maybe shifting them where there is the eyes of the community. So there is a large number of apartments or that have the eyes on this place, and there is open space around them.
Okay.
Would you like me to respond to that, or?
Please, yes. This is not an exercise to an end to itself. So I would like, this is a conversation, of course, we're having with you, sir.
I just had one comment after my filibuster commissioner there. I appreciate the design. Overall, I like the design. And as a young man, when I was younger and had a apartment right next to a park, I appreciate the apartments being away from the social space that's going to be loud and disruptive. And I think a family and even a single man being in an apartment is going to appreciate the quietness, being away from that social setting. And I like how you had that all stretched out there of the community area. I appreciate the fact that you put it in there. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Mamoni, thank you very much. Those are good questions, good thoughts and ideas.
Mr. Chair, can I have the applicant respond to it?
To
To the question if it can be a tentative to
Yeah.
relocate and increase the number of solid waste recycling collection areas. And if there is a possibility to, if we can figure out a better location for that shared open space.
Yeah. Let me address your question regarding the open spaces. I think the primary driver for the location of those particular open spaces are the unique views that are available in that area. And personally, I agree that it would be better for that open space to not be surrounded by parking. Unfortunately, the requirements of the development code regarding parking require us to put as many spaces as we can on the site. And so we probably went through 15 or 20 different iterations of the site plan. And this was the area that we felt made the most sense. That's not the only open area that we have. There is also, the swimming pool area is effectively an open area for common use by the residents. And adjacent to the swimming area to the west is another open area that is typically designed for children, which is normal sort of in proximity to the swimming pool area. So I'm also going to rely on our architect, Doug Circosta, to address your comments, but those are my basic responses to the open space issues. And your second question is a very good question regarding the trash locations. Historically, our company often placed trash receptacle locations close to every building to make it very convenient for everybody. And what we have found from a management standpoint is that, one, it's very hard to police all those areas. You end up with a lot of trash and waste that people don't put in the cans. We have more pest problems with these multiple locations. And we also have, garbage trucks seem to have gotten bigger and bigger. So it places limitations on where those trucks have access to the garbage location. So in most of our developments, including developments that are larger than this, we only have one large trash area that people, what we find is residents often, just kind of like we do at home, will take out the trash in the evening or in the morning, and they'll do it when they're getting ready to run an errand. So they often will drive to the trash place. These two locations, by the way, have trash compactors. So they're designed to handle a large volume of trash. And so, as I say, typically we only go with one large one that is well organized and maintained. In this case, because of the grade changes, we felt that it was necessary to have two. So I understand your comments with regard to making them more convenient. We found from a management perspective that it works better to consolidate them, and our tenants seem to like that, and they learn to adapt to it and use them very efficiently.
Okay. So even understand even the number might be sufficient. You must have been. Would there be consideration to move the southern one instead of so far to the west along the parking spaces between the building I and the building H? You have on the southern boundary, you have a lot of parking spaces there. And if you were putting it somewhere there, same scale, same amount of number to solid waste and recycling collection area, there could be some consideration about moving this collection area more to the east, again, along the parking that is bordering the south border between building I and building H.
Yeah, unfortunately, access from to the compactor from a truck would be restricted in that area. The other thing to consider is that we consider when locating these is, frankly, residents don't really like being near the compactor. So we try to find places that are as far away from direct proximity to apartment units as possible while still being relatively convenient.
Do you have clear where the waste management truck would approach the subdivision? Would they come through Edgefield Place? Would they come through Halsey Loop? How do they come in, these trucks? What kind of movement do they have?
All of the access to the property is off Halsey Loop.
So they will pretty much enter through Halsey Loop, either the northern one or the southern one, turn left, and then go between building I and building G, and then pretty much dead end in front of the solid waste recycling collection area, which is at the corner, exactly at the corner.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chairman.
I wouldn't want to get too far into moving that without consulting with Public Works. They're the people that have reviewed this and signed off on it to this point.
But that is a concern that I have. So I would like to see if there is a possibility to understand better, because that's exactly what happened. And we cannot move it to the east, but then we can dead end it into it. So I understand. So the last question for you, sir, is that going back to the shared open space with a beautiful topography with a view, it is surrounded by carports. Is there any way we can at least relocate those carports somewhere else and have just regular parking spaces? Because again, you might have a beautiful topography and a beautiful view, but you put carports with roofs on top of it and the view is gone. Is there consideration to that, to create this open space a little more comfortable? You're surrounding it on the north and the south by carport. And so that the argument about the beautiful view, there goes.
My name's Doug Sircosta. I'm the architect for the project. I'd like to respond to that. If you look at the civil drawings and look at the topography of the site, what really is shown there on the site plan is that there's a retaining wall on the north edge of the open space. So the parking that's on the north side of the open space is below the barbecue area and the areas, so that you look over the top of it. It's not blocking you. The carports aren't blocking your view.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. How much the difference in elevation is between the parking with the carport and the barbecue shared open space? What do you suggest? Ballpark, 6 feet, 8 feet?
It's high enough that you look over top of any carport.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. At this time, I'd like to take a 10-minute recess.
Mr. Chair, you just need to gavel out the public hearing first.
Yes.
Tanny?
Make a motion to end the public hearing.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can I make a motion to end
Yes.
the public hearing?
Yes.
I make a motion to end the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Wittrin, second by Commissioner Wadilla to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is closed and we are in recess until 8:50. Thank you. Okay, we are back in session. Case file LU 00202021. And at this time, we have closed the public hearing.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Before you dive into deliberation, Commissioner Wilcox had requested information before the meeting that we wanted to just briefly show on screen. The information which should look familiar to you, this was an exhibit we showed in the previous land use case file. This was a comparison of properties, comparator properties in Troutdale, as well as the 3 referenced examples that Carla Properties, the applicant, has developed in Gresham and Happy Valley. The additional information that Mr. Wilcox was looking forward, statistics on the Mountain Meadows apartments, which are highlighted here. They are about 30 years of age. They're the ones that are located off 257th. Very similar unit count. Where it differs, though, is there's a higher portion of 3-bedroom units. There's also relatively higher garage space count in there. I know that project was referenced as sometimes having some parking issues. It might be because of the bedroom count and the garage space factor. Staff was unable to do an observation of that site to do a count, so we regret that we weren't able to do that, but at least you have the figures here on screen in comparison to the other properties where we were able to do that information. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay. All right. Couple of things before we get going. I just had a couple of comments on the pages that we received from Mr. Handy. We presently have an application in front of us, and by state statute, we are to render a decision on this application. And that does not include making a recommendation to the city council about acquiring parkland. I'm not saying that a recommendation couldn't be made, but this has not been anything that this body, to my knowledge, has ever done in the past. And our job is to work with what we have in front of us. And that is the application that is here. And so it's not a matter of not doing anything. It's a matter of doing what we are obligated to do. The other thing, I think the applicant has followed direction and attempted to do what we asked them to do. And I think, you know, some of the debate that we've had will spark some future conversations about maybe putting in possible design standards or looking at things like that in the future. But I think it would be actually unfair to staff and the applicant to change the design at this point. So I would think that if we have serious issues, then we're going to have to vote accordingly. But I just don't know that I would support us changing the design substantially on the applicant. And I would call this the 11th hour.
Can I comment on that?
Actually, you cannot at this time.
Can I comment? Can I make a comment back to the applicant's attorney?
Not in public session.
No, because the public hearing, Mr. Handy's closed.
I understand, but I also understood that he would take questions.
That was questions of the commission.
Right, that's questions of the commission itself. We typically run 3 to 5 minutes for public comment, and you were almost 10.
There was a misstatement. I just wanted to get a clarification on it.
Okay, this won't be part of the record. Okay, so we need to. I can't take any further comment at this time.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry too. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. With that, I guess I'd open it up for comments from the commissioners.
Sure.
Go ahead, Commissioner Whitford.
I would just say, I, from what I've seen here, I believe the applicant has made a significant effort to do what they could within their power, make some changes, show sincere effort to do what is being asked of them. So.
Okay.
The only comment I would have, Ed, do we have any information on the proposed widening of Halsey Street in the near future?
Mr. Whitedale, when you're talking about proposed widening, are you talking about lane addition, like for turning lanes, or like 4 laning it, or what would you mean by that?
4 lanes.
I don't believe the level of service right now that Halsey has requires it. The county and the applicant still have some considerable work to do to determine the level of improvement, whether that be the channelization lane or a turn lane. That's still being worked on. And at the same rate, the city and the county are in a grant application now with the two other cities to the west to look at the entire Halsey Street design. So my suspicion is that unless there's something that is urgently needed, any future widening would just be for turning traffic and for enhanced pedestrian safety. I don't think you'll see 4 lanes on Halsey anytime soon.
Chris, are you, in your answer, are you suggesting that, first of all, was there an analysis by the transportation department? And do we have a number about the traffic increase along the street of an intersection because of the development? What would be the traffic increase because of the development generate as average traffic? And again, question 1, is there an analysis by a transportation department from the city that tells us what kind of traffic increase the development would bring if the need for a new signal would be necessary? Because right now there's no signal, correct?
There is no signal. To answer the first part of your question, yes, there was a traffic impact analysis performed by Kittleson and Associates. Many of you know them. They're a local traffic engineering firm.
Which was included in the packet.
It was included in the packet.
But this is from the city or this is from the client?
This is from the
Kittleson from the client.
This is from the client. However, the city and the county transportation staff, the civil engineers at the city, as well as the county transportation, because Halsey is a county facility, both looked at it, both made determinations that based on the ITE manual, based on the number of units, expected traffic counts, that Halsey Loop and therefore Halsey Street could accommodate it. However, there would be some improvements. Signalization at this time was not warranted.
Okay.
Turning or channelization could be.
Great, thank you. Yep, very clear.
Commissioner Prickett.
I agree with Commissioner Whitten that I think the applicant has proven that he's tried to give us the best he can for this piece of property that is kind of a unique piece of property. So I think the applicant has proven that he has given us his all on this design of these apartments.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Prickett.
Commissioner Stafferson,
Oh,
or
yes,
Chair Stafferson, sorry.
Commissioner.
I would agree with the sentiments that have been raised by Commissioner Prickett and Wittrin.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other discussion? Okay, so we want to take this variance first.
Yeah, let me just for the benefit of the public and for the Planning Commission, reshare my screen here momentarily, and we'll go through the sequencing. We also have a suggested motions on the screen, which you are welcome to read verbatim. But you would be taking variances first. We suggest building height, then setback standards. That's for again the southerly property parking area, then the parking count number, followed by the site development, and then the lot line adjustment, and then a final order approval or denial.
And just a reminder that if the variance fails, site development review fails.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Great. Chair,
Commissioner Wittrin.
make a motion to approve the findings for the variance to the building height, component of case file LU 00102021 as presented.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Wickman, second by Commissioner Prickett, to approve the finding for the variance to the building height component of case file LU 00102021 as presented. Any discussion on the motion?
This is Commissioner Wilcox.
Wilcox.
I just had a comment. The height variance allows for four levels on the downslope side of the building. So that's kind of a density bonus for the developer. I just want to make that point. Thank you.
Okay,
Commissioner Wittrin,
Yes.
Commissioner Wadilla,
Yes.
Commissioner Mamone,
Yes.
Commissioner Prickett,
Yes,
Commissioner Wilcox,
Yes.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Chairman Stephenson.
yes. Okay, that one passes.
Mr. Chair, before you entertain a motion, number 2, where is underlined as amended, should read as presented, unless anybody offers an amendment to the findings. So that should say as presented.
Sure.
Commissioner Wittrin.
Make a motion to approve the findings for the variance to the setback standards components of case file LU 00102021 as presented.
Mr. Chair, just a procedural note too, and I apologize for this. The slides here are referencing the wrong case number.
I know.
Before you move forward, may we
20.
make, yeah. And
2-0.
we'll also have to do that for number 1, and I'll make edits to this slide here as
I
you move
thought I
along.
caught that on the first one, maybe I didn't.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry, I just want to make sure we get that correct. So apologize for that.
All right,
I can fix it going forward.
okay.
Give me one moment. I'll put the item back on the screen here momentarily.
Did you get a second for that?
I did not, but I think Chris may want me to repeat that. With
If
a
you can
2-0.
repeat it, yeah, that would be cleaner.
I can do that. Okay. Chair,
Commissioner Wittrin.
yes. I make a motion to approve the findings for the variance to the setback standards components of case file LU 00202021 as presented.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Wittrin, second by Commissioner Prickett, to approve the findings for the variance in the setback standard component of case file LU 002021 as presented. Is there any discussion on the motion?
This is Commissioner Wilcox again.
Go ahead, sir.
I just wanted to point out, since this is where the compact spaces were switched to standard spaces, I see in comparing the two proposals, it went from 81 compact to 27 compact. So that's a reduction of 2/3. Just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Yeah, and
But they picked it up in the regulation size spaces.
Chair.
Yes.
And that was also, Mr. Wilcox, that's also where I brought it up to the applicant as well, as where they could also possibly split spaces. But I'm good where it's at.
Okay. All right, any other discussion on the motion? Okay, Mr. Lopez.
Commissioner Wittrin,
Yes.
Commissioner Wadilla,
Yes.
Commissioner Mamone,
Yes.
Commissioner Prickett,
Yes,
Commissioner Wilcox,
Yes.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Chairman Stephenson.
Yes, okay, that one passes. Okay.
Chair.
Commissioner Wittrin.
I make a motion to approve the findings for the variance to the parking standards component of case file LU 00202021 as presented.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Wittrin, second by Commissioner Prickett to approve the variance to the parking standard component of case file LU 002021 as presented. Any discussion on the motion?
This is Commissioner Wilcox again.
Go ahead, Commissioner Wilcox.
Are we on the parking standard now?
We are.
Okay. And where to begin, actually? Since the applicant added 12 garages, I guess I'll start there. At the previous meeting, I raised the issue of garages not automatically being parking spaces. Kind of repeating myself from before, but I'll go ahead and do it anyway. A garage isn't a parking space unless someone chooses to pay the extra rental fee for the space. And also they have to choose to put a car in it rather than use it for storage. Along those lines, I'd like to revisit Mountain Meadows as a comparator property because the number of units is almost identical. I'll repeat what was on Chris's chart. 164 units, 330 spaces, 131 standard, 115 compact, 84 garages. At 2.33, that called for 382 spaces. They had provided 330, so they were 52 short. I don't know whether they got a variance or whether they were operating under a different standard. It was noteworthy to me that the 115 compacts that they had put them right exactly at the 35% maximum allowance for compacts. To the issue of garages now, at a previous meeting, Mr. Nugent acknowledged that not every garage is going to have a car in it. The estimate he was offering up was 80% parking utilization of garages. So I decided to visit Mountain Meadows yesterday and talk to their property manager. And she couldn't say for sure what their parking utilization was for their garages, but her best estimate was 50%. So that's a lot of parking spaces lost to storage, and they're 100% rented there. So they charge $100 per month for their garages. That's as I mentioned in a previous meeting, that's substantially less than what a self-storage unit charges. Also, in my conversation with their property manager, talked about people doubling up because vacancy rates are near zero in the area. Rents are high, so you got people getting roommates. You might have multi-generational households. At one point, our daughter and her husband were living with us, and between the two couples, we had 4 cars, so we were taking up more than our fair share of the street parking in our residential neighborhood. So imagine what that would look like in an apartment complex. She also mentioned that they have a policy of only one registered car per driver resident. So they do have a parking problem there that she readily acknowledged. She actually said they've been trying to acquire the property to the back of their property for additional parking. Their parking ratio worked out to, as Chris showed on the chart, 2.0. So it's pretty close to what we're looking at for Fox Ridge. See if I got any other notes here. I think that about covers it, but bottom line, my position is that there's a clear path to approval at reduced density as far as the parking standard goes. So I see no basis for granting a variance for the parking. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilcox. Okay. Motion on the floor. Any other discussion on the motion?
Well, I guess I would just say is, Commissioner Wilcox wants to say it's very close to. You took the slide down, Chris.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Very close to Mountain Meadows at 2.01, and the applicant is going to be at 2.10. But then again, it is also very close to Troutdale Terrace at 2.18, which the rentals and the comps are very close to that as well. So I think we're once again apples to apples, and I guess we're all using our best judgment here of what we feel is this is going to look like in parking when it all comes out at the end of the wash. But I feel the applicant has tried to maximize everything he's got as much space as possible. So there's my 2 cents.
And this is our job.
Yep.
Okay, if there's no other discussion on the motion.
Yes, just one question, Mr. Chair. Chris, for you, just to verify that I understood correctly. So the ratio after everything with the new number of units and with the number of parking is 2.09 parking for units. Is that correct?
I think we had calculated as 2.10, but yeah, very close.
2.10. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay,
Commissioner Wittrin,
Yes.
Commissioner Wadilla,
Yes.
Commissioner Mamone,
Yes.
Commissioner Prickett,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilcox,
No.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Chairman Stephenson.
yes. Okay, passes. Okay, now.
Give me one moment,
Would
sorry.
like to go back. We do the first one,
Sure.
is building height. We could.
So I just need to make a motion.
So item 1, just,
Procedurally.
yeah, what you would do is make a motion striking the earlier motion you made on that and reading it from there.
Sure.
Yes, Commissioner Wittrin.
I'd like to make a motion to strike my previous motion for case file LU 00102021 and instead approve the findings for the variance to the building height component of case file LU 00202021 as presented.
I second.
That'll be contingent upon the person who seconded the motion originally.
I second.
So we have a motion and a second. Okay, to approve the findings for the variance to the building height component of case file LU 00202021 as presented. Any discussion on that one? It's a little retread here. Mr. Lopez.
Commissioner Wittrin,
Yes.
Commissioner Wadilla,
Yes.
Commissioner Mamone,
Yes.
Commissioner Prickett,
Yes.
Wilcox,
Yes.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Chairman Stephenson.
Yes. That one's in the books. Okay.
There we go. Sorry.
You're okay. Chair,
Commissioner Whitman.
make a motion to approve the findings for the site development review components for case file LU 00202021 as presented.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Whitman, second by Commissioner Prickett, to approve the findings for the site development review component of case file LU 002021 as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. Mr. Lopez.
Commissioner Wittrin,
Yes.
Commissioner Wadilla,
Yes.
Commissioner Mamone,
Yes.
Commissioner Prickett,
Yes.
Wilcox,
No.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Chairman Stephenson.
Yes. Okay, that one goes. All right.
Here,
Yes, Commissioner Whitman.
make a motion to approve the findings for the lot line adjustment component for case file LU 00202021 as presented.
Where's your little sister?
I'll second that.
Okay. You got aced out there, Prickett.
I know.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
Okay, I'm sorry. I pushed the wrong button. I'm sorry.
There.
I pushed the wrong button. I had to make a quick change. Okay.
Any discussion?
All right. We have a motion and a second to approve the finding for the lot line adjustment component of case file LU 002021 as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Wittrin,
Yes.
Commissioner Wadilla,
Yes.
Commissioner Mamone,
Yes.
Commissioner Prickett,
Yes.
Wilcox,
Yes.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Chairman Stephenson.
Yes, okay.
Then we didn't have any amendments for the final approval. right?
I would propose to this one, we add screening.
I'm good with that.
Do you have language, Mr. Chair, that you wish to add on the screen here?
I'd like to have adequate screening, separating the properties in the form of a fence. And materials to be approved by staff.
Copy it, sir. No, copy of the findings. I don't.
Can I borrow your copy of the findings, Mr. Chair?
16.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What on the screen match the spirit and intent of your proposed condition?
Pretty easy to match the spirit. Yeah. You okay with that?
Good here.
All right. So we're adding 16. Any others?
Chair,
Commissioner Wittrin.
I make a motion, we approve the final order and conditions of approval for case file LU 00202021 Fox Ridge Apartments as amended.
A second?
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve finding of fact and final order conditions of approval. I can loop those. For case file LU 002021 Fox Ridge Apartments as amended. Any discussion on the motion? No.
Commissioner Wittrin,
Yes.
Commissioner Wadilla,
Yes.
Commissioner Mamone,
Yes.
Commissioner Prickett,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilcox,
Yes.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Chairman Stephenson.
Yes. Okay, that passes.
Chris, I just have a question though, on the condition of approval. Do we have to specify where these improvement with the fence are necessary? Is there a specific location all around the property, the language? You know, if you open the document in 1 year or in 6 months or 9 months, maybe unless there is reference somewhere else, you should specify. Can you bring to the screen the condition?
I can get more specific if you feel it's needed.
Isn't that why we put staff in there?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, one moment,
Chris,
Mr.
could you go
Mamone.
ahead?
Yes, sure, of course.
The way staff would interpret this condition of approval is that the applicant has to demonstrate that it is accomplishing adequate screening. The applicant did mention, and staff has observed, that there exists fencing in some of the perimeter already, and you also have sufficient screening by way of the trees on the westerly property line, and they mentioned the construction of a retaining wall.
Okay.
So I think we would approach it with, if there were deficiencies as determined by staff, we would compel the applicant to install those per code. And if there was a discrepancy between us and them, we would just take it back to this body to get it clarified.
I'm fine with that. I know. The problem is that if we are reading the document in a vacuum in 6 months or 9 months, or we open if we open this condition, I'm not quite sure I can tell you where the adequate screening should be. So if you already have something in mind, wouldn't be more appropriate to identify the logistic? Because it can be interpreted in 6 months, 9 months, can be interpreted in any possible way. We don't want to impose even more on the applicant. We want to impose what we decide to impose. So if there is a specific logistics, maybe we should clearly spell it out.
If you want a site plan, I think we can probably do that. It was just 9:30. I just didn't.
I think it's the applicant's burden to demonstrate where they believe the deficiencies are. It's as the condition suggests, the planning commission has empowered staff to approve the location and material of any deficiencies that occur. So
Okay.
if you trust your staff to make those accommodations, and if there is a discrepancy, then we would take it back to this body for clarification.
Again, it's not a matter of trusting the stuff. I trust the stuff. It's just that I've never been confronted with a condition that is as vague as this one. If we impose a condition, whatever it might be, there is a specific language to identify, to be unequivocal about what are we asking, because we're asking something. There's a condition. So to me, but again, in a level to compromise with everybody, I even voted for the development. It's not exactly what I would have done it, but it was plenty good, and personal preference at times had to go on the side. But to me, this opens ambiguity. If you feel there is no ambiguity, then we're okay then.
I think we are okay.
You're okay. I guess I'd ask the rest of the commission, do you want me to refine this?
No.
Well, you'd have to revisit the decision.
Yeah,
too, because
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
All looked at it and said to be approved by the staff, and we all voted yes. I think we're good.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your help.
Real quick for the planning commission, good news. I know you've had a series of special meetings the past couple of months. No special meeting this month, so you are free to 2 Wednesdays from now. Enjoy your night off. However, be mindful there are still plenty of things occurring around the city. We continue to have our Parks Master Plan digital open house, the survey. If you have not taken your survey or encourage your friends and family to do the Parks Master Plan survey, please do that. We also want to hear from seniors and from kids especially. There's no age limit on the survey. So please provide us some really good feedback. The Parks Advisory Committee is counting on that. In addition to that, the Public Safety and Equity Committee will be having its first ever meeting in this room next Thursday. So that is the 21st. I believe Commissioner Wittrin also serves on that committee as well. So that was the reconstitution of what used to be just the Public Safety Committee. It is back with some additional guidance and direction as determined by Council. Beyond that, we are expecting you all to have a type 4 hearing on code amendments to the fencing and on the sign code, as we discussed at our last meeting. So we will have those teed up for you a month from now. And as always,
Red lines.
what's that?
Red line. Red line.
Yes. And then, as always, as Halloween approaches, please be mindful of the kiddos in costumes and drive safe.
That's it.
Do we have anything else, Alex? Oh, I guess we should also mention our staff additions. We have a new permit specialist, Paige Torres, who works mostly in the building division. She started with us on Monday. And at your next meeting, you'll get to meet our new planner, Melissa Johnston, who's coming to us from Woodland, Washington. She's a resident of Vancouver, and she'll be joining us next week. So we're happy to have her on
And you're
board.
sending her to us.
There are worse punishments. It could be to HLC, so that's Alex's punishment.
All right. Commissioner Wydilla.
You're doing everything.
Okay. Commissioner Prickett,
Nothing.
Commissioner Wilcox.
Yes, even though the applicant came up short in my book for parking spaces, I was encouraged that he was, I don't know if it's guaranteed or not, but they're considering putting in 220 outlets for car charging in the garages. So that's a good sign.
Thank you. Commissioner Allen. Anything?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm learning from this planning commission, and I appreciate the input you all have, and that our last decision turned out to be a better development because of it. So thank you.
Commissioner Ramone.
No comments, but a question. So the meeting that it was scheduled to be Wednesday, October 27 is no more.
No meeting. You have a free
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Night off, no pay though. Okay, Commissioner Wittrin.
No comments, but thank you, everybody. It was robust conversation and good meeting.
Want to thank everyone for all their time they've spent reviewing this and for the discussion we had this evening. And I want to thank staff for all their work on this project. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Great. Have a nice evening. Good night.